What's up, duelists? Today we're doing a little bit of a discussion video. Today we're going to be talking about the 10 major differences between Master Duel, Dueling Book, and IRL Yu-Gi-Oh! These are some things that I've been thinking about a lot more lately. I've been playing a lot of Dueling Book, I've been playing a lot of Master Duel, and I just started playing a lot more IRL Yu-Gi-Oh! Since locals are coming back. I'm primarily a competitive player, so this is going to show my perspective from like the trying to win competitive side of things, but a lot of these can also appeal to the more casual players, which I know is the majority audience of Yu-Gi-Oh! The trading card game. If you guys think of any other differences that I've left out or didn't think of, let me know in the comments below. I'm sure there's a ton of different things that make these experiences better or worse for you as a person individually, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I do read all of my comments usually, so your words will get seen. Your words will get seen. All right. Onto the actual list. Let's start off with Master Duel. We're gonna be ranking things with a happy and mixed emoji and an angry emoji, and we're just gonna use these three more or less things to be ranking things, and then we'll give an overall rating for these at the end of the video. The first thing for Master Duel is that it's automated. This is a bit of a mixed bag. I think for the format that Master Duel is in, this works. I think for current Yu-Gi-Oh! When there's tons of complicated effects, being automated is not the worst thing. However, it does kind of give your opponent tells when you have hand traps like Artifact Lancia or Maxi. I'm not super sure it's the best, but there isn't really a great alternative to it, especially if you're trying to do a casual, friendly, current-ish format Yu-Gi-Oh! Platform. In general, I can see this being a slightly better than bad thing, but I can definitely see some of the complaints with having an automated format. Next up, it is available on mobile, but it crashes super frequently on Android. This is something they could maybe fix, or maybe they've thought about fixing, or maybe they're trying to fix. I primarily play it on my phone. I primarily play it on an Android. And the fact that I can't get through maybe 30% of my games without the thing crashing, it's like, it's just a miserable experience. 2 out of 3 times I try to play a game in the ranked portion, my game crashes. And that's just, you can't have a game unless it's not doing that. So unless they fix that, this is not really a positive thing, because having mobile but having it be terrible, you might as well not even have mobile at all. Next up, it's also not available on Mac. I'm a Mac user, so this is kind of like a personal thing. Like, how the fuck are you gonna not have this available on Mac? I know Mac is only like 10% of all PC users, not PC, desktop users is Mac, but I mean, still, like 10% of the market share is like, that's still reasonable. That's, I feel like you should at least try to have it there. I don't know. Maybe I'm just biased here that it not being on Mac is a bad thing, but yeah, that's kind of where it's at. Of course I could emulate it, but that's just extra steps to play a game that we'll get into is not really that appealing to me personally. Okay, no alt formats. This is the big one. Master Duel, there's no alt formats. There's only the format they give you. And the format they give you, well, we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, you don't get to play GOAT format. You don't get to play Edison format. You don't get to play like draft or anything. You only get the formats that they give you. And I think that's kind of hit or miss. It's a little awkward because these formats are, I mean, they're not bad. They did like the XYZ format thing that's like, that was kind of cool. They did a few other things like the early pregame stuff where you're playing with pre-built decks that were kind of cool. But at the same time, it's kind of like, like, do we really want to be playing your formats? No, we want to be playing our formats. We kind of want control over the format. So I don't really know how I feel about it. Not having alt formats in general is just a bad thing, in my opinion. It's just a bad thing. The interface is pretty mid. I'm going to be honest, it's not very fun to use. It's not very fun to play. The worst part about it, I think, is the long animations and the terrible, terrible deck builder. I can't stand the deck builder in Master Duel. Unless you know the specific card you're looking for, it's really hard to find. Dueling Book has a very competent deck search function and deck builder. I feel like it's a very easy to use deck builder. When your competition is that, you could literally just steal their interface. Literally just take it. There's nothing holding that interface down. It's proven that it works. It's proven that people enjoy the Dueling Book interface. Just take that and use it. Add a few extra things to make it so they can search for ultra rares or prismatics or whatever, but just use the one that's already working. I don't see the need to make like a strictly worse builder, honestly. So this is my biggest complaint. And the interface in the actual app itself is pretty mid. The ban list on Master Duel is like an old OCG list, and it's not great. I mean, those old lists had very serious problems, and they don't really appeal to competitive players like myself because of those problems. Best of one format is trash. It's just so bad. In Yu-Gi-Oh, there are so many matchups, there are so many games where you have to have specific cards in your opening hand going second in order to even compete. The difference between this game and something like Pokemon, for example, which is played in best of one format, Pokemon, you'll always get a turn, and in Pokemon, all of your cards search for everything in your deck. So, since you always get a turn to play the game in Pokemon, there's no FTK, there's no turn 1 lockouts, anything like that, you do get a chance to search for a tech card. You can play best of one formats because you can tech stuff for bad matchups, and then always get a chance to search for it. In Master Duel, in best of one format, in Yu-Gi-Oh, you don't get a chance to play your cards before your opponent shuts you out of the game. If your opponent's playing something like Drytron, which we'll get into more lately, or just another combo deck or FTK deck, you have your opening hand to find your hand traps or your relevant pieces of interaction, some of which might just be dead in that specific FTK matchup entirely, and that's it. It's a really big gamble, and I think best of 3 makes it so that you get a chance to just pump your deck full of those anti-FTK cards and give yourself a higher chance to win an actual match against those decks, even if you do lose game 1. I really don't like best of 1 just because it punishes you for trying to play the game. Next up, yeah, Drytron. Well, I mean, this is the biggest issue. I think ultimateness with triple Ava, with triple Ben 10 is just like, this is fucking miserable. If you just don't have the right hand trap, going up against ultimateness plus multiple negates is just like, it's terrible. It's terrible. You either have like the specific hand trap for it or you just lose. I think the biggest issue with this that people kind of talk about, the counter argument, is that Max C, you can use Max C to counter it, but they can just combo off, you don't have Max C, and they have Max C themselves, and it makes their combo even more like, you even try to come back, I'll just pitch Max C, and now all of a sudden, I'll just do it to you again next turn, and just do it over and over again. And I really hate that. I hate that this format is mostly dictated by unfair decks, turn 1 decks. I hate that best of 1 incentivizes that. It's just not fun. Even for casual players, it is not fun. Another kind of negative thing about Master Duel, I mean, you're seeing a little bit of a trend. I promise, there's at least one positive thing here. If you enjoy Master Duel, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not the worst game, okay? It's not the worst game. There's a few obvious upsides to it, but yeah, if you're a competitive player, you got to keep in mind that Konami, this is a cash cow for them. So there's nothing wrong with that from Konami's perspective, having a cash cow, but it's always going to be casual focused. It's always going to have the best interest of their business in mind, and they're never really going to adhere to what the players really want in terms of gameplay. And while this does kind of make sense from a gameplay perspective, you can find a balance where maybe you introduce all of the cards that are legal in TCG, so at least we can have one-to-one testing, even if it is best of 1. Or maybe you have the option to select best of 3. Or maybe you don't include, like, a crazy ban list that lets you play fucking triple Ava, triple Ben 10 shit. You know what I mean? This is kind of an interesting thing. I'm not sure how this is going to play out, but as of right now, it's kind of one of those things that makes me tentative to really invest more into Master Duel, more than just casually playing on my phone here and there. This is one of the biggest things about Master Duel that I actually really like. I really like that Master Duel is free to play. You can pretty much build any deck you want with the gems they provide you, and then you can pay for more decks if you want to. I think this is awesome. I think this is a really great move from Konami to include the card exchange where you can trade any 3 cards for any 1 card of the same rarity. I think that's just super cool, super great for casuals, and it's also super great for competitors too. At the very least, you trade for a deck, you play it for a couple months, you realize you don't like it, and then it becomes a third of a different deck later down the line once you've built up more gems, or maybe you want to spend a little money to get a new deck. I think it's cool. I think it's a really, really good thing. Of course, it's kind of a bare minimum thing that they need to do, but for someone who's, like we mentioned, their interest is mainly business, I think that having a free-to-play option be viable for anyone who is competitive is just a great thing. It's just a great thing in general. And the last but not least thing for Master Duel is it's fun for what it is. If you take Master Duel for what it is, it's pretty fun. I mean, it's just like a casual little like Yu-Gi-Oh game where you can kind of like just do something when you're maybe waiting in line at the store or whatever. It's on your mobile phone. It's there for like building a little deck or like challenging your friends who maybe don't play that often or don't get a chance to play on their phones and stuff. You can play it anywhere. It's Yu-Gi-Oh on the go. It's like Yu-Gi-Oh Light. It's fun for what it is. I mean, that's the ultimate copium. We're kind of huffing copium saying it, but it's not the worst. It's not the worst. I do have a lot of angry reacts here, but that's because I'm a competitive player. If I was a casual, I'd probably have 1 or 2 more happy reacts. And I think the biggest thing is that it's fun if you're free to play, and it's fun if you're pay to play. Getting those shiny cards, they look nice. Getting the free to play cards feels good to have a good deck. I think that's cool. I think ultimately Master Duel, not a bad thing, and it gets more people playing the game, which I think is great. I think it's great. It's also great for streaming and content creation. I haven't made any Master Duel content. If you guys want to see me make Master Duel content, I don't know if you guys would. Most of my fan base is like Edison format people, old format people, and obviously can't play that on Master Duel, so I haven't really made any content outside of like these discussion videos. But if you guys want to see it, I mean, I'd be down to do some stuff. Let me know. Let me know in the comments, I guess. All right, let's move on to Dueling Book. Those are 10 things about Master Duel. Those are the 10 things that really come to mind when I'm playing it or when I'm deciding to play that over Dueling Book or IRL Yu-Gi-Oh. And ultimately, there's not much incentive for me, a competitive player, to play Master Duel, but that's maybe okay. Maybe that's because I'm not the target audience. For Dueling Book, first things first, it's free to play. It already does what Master Duel does, but it does it better. You can play any deck you want. You don't have this gem restriction. You don't have anything like holding you back from building multiple decks. And speaking of building multiple decks, the builder is actually quite good too in Dueling Book, and it lets you just sift through options in a way that's very intuitive and very, very good. Very good, I think. Another thing that I like about Dueling Book, but maybe some people don't, is it's by the people for the people. This obviously comes with some like different implications, different things that maybe are not great, but it is for the people. Ultimately, what the people end up wanting gets implemented, even if it is way down the line, like Edison ladder. Edison ladder, cough, Edison ladder. When is that happening? Yeah, but usually it is by the people for the people. If the people want something, the Dueling Book people, Dueling Book devs, whatever, they will do it. They will make it happen, and I have faith that they'll make it happen. Unfortunately, the amount of time it may take them is undesirable, since they're not really incentivized by anything other than people getting mad. There's no like financial or physical incentive for them to like get something done or add something to the game. Whereas devs on something like Master Duel, they might actually implement stuff if enough people wanted to, because they realize it's something that will immediately make them a ton more money. So I don't know. By the people for the people, I like the vibe. I like the energy of it. I like that kind of feeling of using a platform that was created by people who just want to play and have a good time. But there's obvious downsides to having a game that isn't supported by money, more or less. All right. Next thing. There is every alt format on Dueling Book. This is the best part about Dueling Book. Unfortunately, there's no Edison ladder, so I have to give them a mixed react for this one. But overall, very, very happy that they, you have a way to play all these alt formats, these old formats. You can do them with custom rule sets, which is super awesome. That's something you can't do on any other platform. In general, this is making this YouTube channel possible. So huge shout out to Dueling Book for allowing this option at all, it's just so dope. Things like the progression series that I know a lot of you guys watch, things like speed duels, rush duels, tag team, all that sort of fun stuff. Dueling Book has made this stuff available, and I think that's super cool. I think that's like one of the biggest upsides to Dueling Book. I think this will be a happy react once they get an Edison ladder for me personally, but in general, it should just be a happy react for most people. You can play it on Mac. You can play it on anything, actually, except, of course, mobile. You can't play it on mobile. There's no real mobile adaptation for Dueling Book, and I think this is the biggest selling point that Master Duel has over Dueling Book right now. If you own an iPhone, which is a good amount of people, you can play Master Duel a lot more easily than you can play Dueling Book. I think Master Duel's target audience is going to be largely the mobile audience who's wanting to play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, whereas Dueling Book is more people who are on their computers and stuff. I think that Dueling Book might not need mobile. I think it's just fine to have it as a desktop game. But I don't know. Maybe a mobile thing would be kind of cool for them. We'll see. Another issue with Dueling Book is the fucking servers. If you've ever gotten the connecting message in Dueling Book, you know the pain, you know the suffering. I hate dueling book lag. It pulls you out of the game. It fucking ruins the experience. I hate how bad the servers are. I understand that it's by the people, for the people, like we mentioned earlier, but this is one of my biggest complaints. If I'm in a game and it's a really tense game and I'm like trying to figure out like a multi-step combo or a multi-step problem and the platform just starts lagging and like stops working or kicks me off, all of a sudden my thought process is like super disrupted. My focus is super like thrown off and I just can't seem to like pick it up where I left off, and it's just miserable for gameplay experience. Again, similar to the crashes on Android thing, the servers crashing, the servers resetting frequently, I think this is a really, really miserable part of the dueling book experience, and I would love to see that change in the future. I would love to know what it takes to get better servers for dueling book. I'd be interested in hearing that from maybe people who work at dueling book. Reach out to me on Discord or something. Maybe we could talk about something, but yeah. As of right now, that's one of my biggest complaints. Another thing about dueling book is that there is a chat box because it is manual and you do need to say like what you're doing. You do need to explain to your opponent that things are okay, that you don't have responses. But people can be really, really mean. Like really, really mean. For no fucking good reason too. Like you'll be playing and then maybe you'll like DD Crow an opponent's monster and they'll be like, fuck you, you fucking little bitch, like I'll fucking kill your entire family. You'll be like, dude, what the fuck is going on? Like this is insane. Like people will go off the rails on dueling book. I think it is changing for the better. I notice when I play a lot of Edison format that I see a lot less of this. I still see some people do it and I'm guilty of raging, but I don't type it into the fucking chat box. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to say it to my opponent. I'm just going to say it out loud, maybe on my side of the computer screen, like, oh, fuck that guy, like, whatever. If I'm live on stream, I might rage for a little drama. But of course, like, I'll never type in the chat box that my opponent's being like, I won't say, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you get people straight up saying fucking, like, racial slurs. People saying, like, homophobic shit. It's fucked up. It's fucked up. And I think it is changing. I think it is getting better overall. The climate in dueling book is getting to be a little bit more friendly. People are realizing, like, okay, like, especially during the pandemic, like, we got to keep it chill because we don't know what people are going through. People are going through some hard stuff. Everyone's being a little bit more understanding. I think mental health awareness is a lot larger now. So I think that's a good thing. I think it is changing, and people are a lot nicer than they used to be, especially when playing alt formats, because they're just there to have fun anyway. But the rude people, man, it's one of the worst things. It's one of the worst things. The reason it's mixed is because I think it is getting better. If you guys are on Dueling Book, one of the things you can do to make the experience better for everyone is just be nice. Say good luck, have fun. Say GG. Say nice play. Just compliment people. Be kind. I think this would make the Dueling Book experience in general so much better. So much better. Okay, next up. What have we got? What have we got next up? We've got manual play. Of course, yeah, I just mentioned this, just touched on this. Yeah, manual play. So unlike Master Duel, it's not automated. You do have to do everything manually. It is the closest thing one-to-one to actually playing the physical card game, which I personally love. I think manual play is great. I think it makes for the most fun experience, the most one-to-one accurate experience. I think it's less like a video game and more like an actual card game that way. I personally am not a super big video game guy. I play competitive PvP games, but I don't play a lot of RPGs and that kind of stuff. And I'd rather my card games be competitive PvP games instead of involving the computer making the decisions for my opponent. That's just me personally as a competitive player, as a competitive gamer. That's just what I like. But I can see people not liking this, especially with like current format stuff where there's wicked complicated rulings and all of the ruling stuff in general, which is the next thing. Oh no, that's not the next thing. It's the last thing. The judge calls. Yeah, judge calls. I think the judge calls on Dueling Book are miserable. I think there's not enough judges, and of course, because they're by the people for the people, there's no really easy way to solve that. You can't really pay for judges to be on Dueling Book 24/7 when the platform probably doesn't make any money, let's be honest. If they do, it's all from donations, and that's very volatile. Judge calls can take forever. You can get into situations where there's no judges online at all. It's kind of miserable, but it's just the way that it goes. I think with more people being nicer on the platform, again, back to the rude people thing, I think this becomes less of a problem. People are working together more often now than not in Googling rulings, looking stuff up, and people are more interested in actually learning the rulings and more just happy that they're learning a ruling instead of just like pissed off that they made a mistake because of a ruling. Of course, there's always corner case stuff, but I think in general, the climate of people being collaborative on these types of things is changing, and I think that that's a step in the right direction. And then the thing that I kind of teased a little bit, but the last happy thing for Dueling Book is replays. I think replays are great. I think the replays in Dueling Book are much easier to work with than Master Duel replays. I think having replays in general is good, and I'm glad that Master Duel has it, and I'm really glad that Dueling Book has it, because it allows you to go back and look at your games and be like, okay, where did I mess up? What can I do better? Replays are one of the biggest things for improving as a player, and as a competitive player, it's just an invaluable tool. I think I could add that as a happy face under Master Duel as well. Let me do that real quick. Actually, let me do that. Let's duplicate this and yeah, let's add that. Let's add that. Okay, replays. Yeah, I think replays are great. I huge upside to having replays. It makes people get better at an accelerated rate. You can reflect on your gameplay a lot easier than you can in IRL Yu-Gi-Oh, and in general, it's just an invaluable tool. For coverage, it's really cool too, because you can rewatch old replays. There are people who have made entire channels off of just watching Dueling Book replays, which is super cool. Shout out the DB Grinder, of course, if you guys watch current format Yu-Gi-Oh. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it for Dueling Book. It's a mixed bag. But I think it's overall positive. All right, last but not least, IRL Yu-Gi-Oh. I had the pleasure of going to play an IRL Yu-Gi-Oh tournament last weekend, and I had a blast. And I have to say, before I even get into it, IRL Yu-Gi-Oh is my favorite way to play the game. It's so much better. It's just so much better. It's all of the good stuff with only one or two little shitty things mixed in. And let's get into it. Let's just get into it. First off, it's manual, like Dueling Book. And of course, me, competitive player, I love manual. I love it when the game is more about the person versus the person and less about a computer making decisions for you. Very, very hype. Very, very cool. Of course, got to be careful in IRL dueling. Manualing leads to a lot of like soft cheating or like mistakes or stuff like that. And unfortunately, in IRL Yu-Gi-Oh, there's no instant replay, so you can't go back and like see if your opponent did that to you or not. The next big thing is all formats are now available as well, thanks to OTS Time Wizard. Of course, things like the progression series where you're drafting like a booster box of Pharaoh Servant, you can't exactly do that in current format Yu-Gi-Oh, or not current format Yu-Gi-Oh, but current IRL Yu-Gi-Oh, just because of the availability of Pharaoh Servant booster boxes. Yu-Gi-Oh could do some more stuff like printing more of those battle boxes that were geared towards draft, or even just reprinting old booster boxes and selling them straight up so people could play them. There's obviously a very, very huge market for people drafting old school sets like Pharaoh Servant, Legacy of Darkness, and I think them reprinting that, it's something they haven't really explored doing, and I think that could be pretty huge. I know Pokemon and Magic the Gathering have definitely reprinted older sets in things like Modern Masters or things like the Celebrations 25, and I know Pokemon's doing more reprinting of older cards. I think they could take that one step further as Konami and just really, really maximize the potential of old format stuff by just straight up reprinting old booster boxes. Just old text, old everything, like one-to-one reprints of it. That'd be fucking sweet. And it would make them a ton of money. So I think Konami could definitely benefit off of doing some stuff like to make formats like the Progression series playable IRL. Of course, all the other formats are available to be played in sanctioned tournaments now thanks to OTS Time Wizard, and that's just a huge step in the right direction for Konami. Huge W for them. Next up, the costs are high. If you're playing current format Yu-Gi-Oh, your decks are going to be really expensive. I've mentioned this a couple times in the last few videos, and it's no joke. I'm looking at building a deck right now, and I'm like, okay, I can build half the deck for like the cost of like 30 Edison decks, and then the other half of the deck is like 100 Edison decks. But if you are playing alt formats like Edison format, GOAT format, that kind of stuff, maybe like the common format, I forget what it's called. It's like Yu-Gi-Oh's version of Pauper. Common Charity, that's what it is. Common Charity. Unless you're playing Common Charity, you're looking to spend a lot of money. But you do have all alternative options now. Again, thanks to OTS Time Wizard. You can build an Edison deck. I'm going to do a video in the next few days on just building a new Edison deck and showing how much it costs and how affordable it is and how easy it is to build and get into the format more or less. And that'll be a pretty cool video, I think. And I think if you're building, like, let's say you're building a deck on Master Duel. Well, if you're playing on mobile, you need an iPhone. And iPhones are more expensive than your average Edison deck by a lot. So are Androids, like nice ones that can run Master Duel. If you're not on a Mac and you have a nice gaming PC, well, that's obviously more expensive than an Edison deck. So building an Edison deck, it is money that you wouldn't have to pay to play the game on different platforms. But you do have to pay for the other platforms in a sense that you do have to own a computer, you do have to own a mobile phone. Judge calls. Honestly, judge calls in person are amazing. You call the judge, they walk over to you, they solve the problem, and then you go from there. That's pretty much it. It's super straightforward. Maybe I'm just jaded because the judge calls are so bad on Dueling Book. But if you're playing a manual format, the judge calls got to be good. That's the biggest thing. And I think in IRL Yu-Gi-Oh, it's optimized. There's always a judge at a tournament, and the judge can just walk over and tell you what's up. And that's that. Another cool thing is there's no ghosted play, and you're always fighting a fair fight. It's always you versus your opponent. There's no one playing against you who maybe has like two of their homies on the other side of the screen making sure they don't misplay. That's my biggest issue with Dueling Book and Master Duel to some degree, is that I'm maybe fighting against someone who's like receiving help from someone else and that kind of stuff. I've even been on the other side of that doing these videos where me and like other people will play games and we'll talk through the decisions ourselves, kind of have conversations about the decisions. While that's cool for a video, I think in general, if you're a competitive player and you're like playing in a tournament, I kind of want to know I'm fighting a fair fight. That's something that I really want to know. In IRL Yu-Gi-Oh, you know it immediately. Your opponent is playing a fair fight. There is no replays, so you have limited recall in the games. I think this is one of the biggest issues of IRL Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's one of the biggest one of the biggest draws to playing Dueling Book and Master Duel over IRL Yu-Gi-Oh. If you're a competitive player and you're looking to improve a certain deck or a certain skill, I actually think Dueling Book and Master Duel, well, Dueling Books especially because Master Duel doesn't have real formats, but I think Dueling Book is great for that because you get to practice games and then maximize off of your practice by immediately watching the replays and seeing exactly what happened. Most people can't remember an entire Yu-Gi-Oh game play for play. Limited human recall maybe allows you to have a jaded perspective on a game where you can get maybe a more objective look at it from watching a replay. All right, next. Travel is not always an option. I get it. Traveling to tournaments, traveling to YCSs, traveling, it's not always an option. I mean, for most people, travel is really expensive. It's not in their budget. And also for most people in the past 2 years, travel was not an option for safety reasons. COVID-19 was a deadly virus, and a lot of people didn't want to catch it and spread it to their family or, get sick, end up in the hospital. A lot of people didn't want that. So travel was not always an option. Thankfully, Konami had remote duels. I think that was a very cool decision from Konami to have the remote duels. That's something that Pokemon and Magic didn't do as trading card games, and I think that's a huge W for Konami. But when you do get to travel, it is so much fun. I cannot think of a time I went to a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament and had a bad time. And I have some pretty terrible stories, but at the end of the day, they make for great stories, and you can be like, yo, dude, do you remember that time we went to Reno and we drank 4 Locos and like did all this crazy stuff and alcohol poisoning and missed the tournament entirely? But it's like, you know what I'm saying? It's just funny stuff like that can happen. And when you travel, it's almost always like a good time. There's very rarely like a negative experience traveling, and it's always something you can kind of add to your human experience points. You're like, yeah, I traveled, I did that, and it's a cool thing. If you've never traveled to a tournament, I definitely recommend it if you can. If it's in your budget, if you're vaccinated, if you're not exposing anyone to the coronavirus or whatever, then definitely consider traveling to an Edison tournament or a tournament of any kind. And speaking of tournaments of any kind, there is a tournament spreadsheet for Edison locals in the description of this video. Make sure and find a tournament there. I mean, check it out. There's a bunch of locals who are running like 30, 40-man Edison tournaments. You can find one near you, maybe go with a couple friends, play some Yu-Gi-Oh, play a cheap format like Edison, and just have a good time. Next up is collecting. You get to collect shiny paper. This is just awesome. I love collecting shiny cards. I don't even care if the cards are good. I just like if they look good. That's it. It's just nice. It's nice to own nice things. Collecting nice cards makes you feel nice. And that's it. That's really it. It just feels nice to own nice things. Sparkly paper feel good. It gives you a stronger sense of identity too. I think your collection, it speaks to you as a person. The cards you choose to buy, the cards you choose not to buy, the cards you choose to include your deck and stuff like that. The cards that you own, it builds up your own personal identity. It gives you a stronger sense of self. I think collecting has a cool depth to it that I think is underrated, and I think that you can only really get the collecting part of it from IRL Yu-Gi-Oh. In Master Duel, you can kind of get it with like, oh, I have these ultra rares, but not really, because just about anyone can get them, and it's not really the same. It's not really the same. I think in IRL Yu-Gi-Oh, having a super rare like misprint card maybe, or just something like that, is just super cool. Or a card that you had when you were a child and you're playing in your current deck, like your childhood monster reborn in your current deck, like something like that. It's just really cool. It's a good feeling. It's a good human feeling that I think is very underrated about IRL Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's one of my favorite parts about the game as well. Second to last is Swiss. If you run a tournament, seriously, why Swiss? Why are we still playing Swiss in 2022? Let's play double elimination like fucking Giga Chads, okay? The Chad fucking double elimination versus the Virgin Swiss. I hate Swiss. I hate Swiss tournaments. I think YCSs should be double elimination. I think everything should be double elimination. If anyone who runs a tournament is hearing this, I don't know if Konami requires you to play Swiss. I don't know how that works, but I think double elimination is the way we should move forward. If anyone from Konami is watching this, please let us sanction double elimination tournaments. It would be so much better. It would be so much better play experience. You can lose twice. You can go get food with your friends. You could just dip out. You don't have to be there all day, just waiting, hoping you don't bubble, all this other shit. Swiss is ass. I fucking hate playing Swiss. As a competitor, you understand Swiss is miserable. It's not fun at all. Swiss is a little better for commentary, but not by much. Not by much. Double elimination, way better. Way better. No cap. No cap. Okay, next up. Friends. This is the biggest thing. I gave it triple smiley face. This is the #1 win for IRL Yu-Gi-Oh! Is you get to hang out with your friends and you get to be social. After the last 2 years of being, quarantined or social distancing or whatnot, it is super important to just be around other people. We were really sleeping on how much playing paper Yu-Gi-Oh! Added to our life. I mean, I know personally, playing paper Yu-Gi-Oh! It gave me a lot of outlets for being social and meeting people, joking around with friends, going and doing fun things, trying out new food places, whatever, Just all these cool things happened because I was playing paper Yu-Gi-Oh! With other people. Having a reason to get together is super important. Like I mentioned earlier, we're getting older. That's just facts. I mean, most of the people who play Yu-Gi-Oh! Now are older than the people who used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! 10 years ago. That's just the way it is. The game is now catering to older players. And as we get older, there's less opportunities for us to be social. We no longer have high school. We no longer have, university. We're graduated. We're grown. We go to our job and then we go home. If you're single like I am now, if you're living on your own like I am now, it's really easy to be really lonely. And that sucks. It's really bad for your mental health. It's really shitty. And I think that this part of Yu-Gi-Oh! This is the reason to play Yu-Gi-Oh! In general, is just the social aspect. I think it's great. I think it's phenomenal. I think the communities, it used to suck, but it's getting a lot better. And I don't know. I just think it's so much more important as you get older to stay social and have a lot of fun things to do. Maybe that's just what's on my mind because I'm almost 30 and I'm thinking about it, But, I don't know. Everyone has a good story about Yu-Gi-Oh! Everyone has a good story. I met this guy playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I met this girl playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I met this person playing Yu-Gi-Oh! We were best friends now. We've been friends since whatever. My best friend, he's someone I met in high school because he sold me a Dark Arm Dragon, and then we joked around about Diamond Dude Turbo and all this other stuff. You just have a bunch of different things that you don't have unless you have this sort of social interaction. It's good, I think, after a year or two or whatever, shut inside to get out and see some people. Anyway, that's gonna be it for today's video. I give IRL Yu-Gi-Oh! An overall smiley face. Let's give it a smiley face. I give Dueling Book an overall smiley face. I also give Dueling Book an overall smiley face. And then, as a competitor, I'm inclined to give Master Duel an overall angry face. But as someone who understands the value of having new players and the value of having the mobile audience, I have to give Master Duel also a smiley face. So even though most of my personal opinions on Master Duel are angry and not fun, I think overall Master Duel is a positive thing for Yu-Gi-Oh! In general, and I think it existing in this sphere is a good thing, so I'm going to give it a happy face too. Anyway, leave us a like and leave us a nice comment. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know if you like these types of videos. They're a little bit different than what I normally do. Just have a nice day. E3 Yu-Gi-Oh! Signing off. Peace.